There is a distinction to be made between commands addressed to single individuals and those addressed to many. This distinction is already apparent in the original biological command. Some animals live singly and react singly to the threat of their enemies, others live in herds, which are collectively threatened. In the first case the animal flees or hides alone, in the second the whole herd does so. An animal which normally lives in a herd, but which is accidentally surprised alone by an enemy, will try to flee to its herd. Individual flight and mass flight are fundamentally different. The collective fear of a herd in flight is the oldest and perhaps the commonest example of a crowd state. It seems very likely that sacrifice originated in this state of crowd fear. A lion pursuing a herd of gazelles, all fleeing together in fear of him, desists from pursuit as soon as he succeeds in seizing one of them. This animal, his victim, is a kind of sacrifice which procures a respite for its companions in the herd. As soon as the other gazelles see that the lion has got what it wants, their fear abates. From mass flight they revert to the normal state of a herd, each animal grazing on its own and doing as it pleases. If gazelles had a religion and the lion was their god, they could, in order to appease his appetite, voluntarily surrender one of their number to him. This is exactly what happens among men. Religious sacrifice springs from a state of crowd fear. It serves to halt the pursuit and, for a while, still the hunger of the hostile power. When in a state of fear a crowd wants to stay together, its members feel that their only protection in acute danger is the proximity of their fellows. They are a crowd particularly in virtue of the identical direction of their flight. An animal which happens to make a leap in a different direction is in more danger than the others, and it feels in even more danger than it is, because it is alone its fear is greater. One might call the common direction of animals fleeing together their conviction. It is this which keeps them together and urges them forwards. They do not panic as long as they do not feel alone, as long as each animal does the same as the next, all executing exactly the same movements. In virtue of the parallel movements of head, neck and legs, this mass flight resembles what, in men, I have called the throbbing or rhythmic crowd. But as soon as the fleeing animals are surrounded, the picture changes. A common direction of flight is no longer possible and the mass flight turns into a panic, each animal tries to flee separately and each gets in the way of the rest. The circle around them tightens. During the slaughter that ensues each animal is its fellow's enemy, blocking its way to safety. But let us now return to the command. I have said that commands addressed to single individuals are different from those addressed to numbers. Before establishing the general truth of this statement, I ought to mention the most important exception to it. An army is an artificial gathering of men and its very nature entails the abrogation of this distinction. In it the effect of a command is the same, whether it is addressed to one man, to several, or to many. An army can only exist so long as all commands have equal validity. They all come from above and each remains intact and isolated in itself. Thus an army should never be a crowd. In a crowd a command spreads horizontally. It may originally strike a single individual from above. But, since others like himself stand near him, he immediately passes it on to them. In his fear he moves closer to them and in a second they are all affected by it. First a few of them start to move, then more, and finally all. The instantaneous spread of the same command turns them into a crowd and soon they are all in flight together. Since the command is immediately diffused, no sting is formed. There is no time for this, what would otherwise have become permanent is instantaneously dissolved. A command to a crowd leaves no sting behind. A threat which initiates a crowd flight is dissolved in that same flight. It is only commands that remain isolated which lead to the formation cannot be completely of stings. The threat contained in such commands dissolved. Anyone who has carried out an order as an individual keeps his original resistance as a sting, a hard crystal of resentment. This he can only get rid of by himself giving the same order to someone else. The sting is nothing but the hidden replica of the command he once received and could not immediately pass on. Only in this identical form can he free himself from the command. A command addressed to a large number of people thus has a very special character. It is intended to make a crowd of them and, in as far as it succeeds in this, it does not arouse fear. The slogan of a demagogue, impelling people in a certain direction, has exactly the same function. It can be regarded as a command addressed to large numbers. From the point of view of the crowd, which wants to come into existence quickly and to maintain itself as a unit, such slogans are useful and indeed indispensable. The art of a speaker consists in compressing all his aims into slogans. By hammering them home he then engenders a crowd and helps to keep it in existence. He creates the crowd and keeps it alive by a comprehensive command from above. Once he has achieved this, it scarcely matters what he demands. A speaker can insult and threaten an assemblage of people in the most terrible way and they will still love him if, by doing so, he succeeds in forming them into a crowd.